Okay, so the quick fix to the config that we're missing in the previous video is actually to make sure that we point to the right thing, okay? So to point to something that also enables the serial console. You can use the diffconfig script in order to see what is the difference between this one and that one that the link originally pointed to. I'm not going to do it now. What I'm going to do is to show, I'm going to first build the kernel, and I'm going to show you the effects of some of like the early debugging script, okay? Early debugging parameters. So right now, let's just go ahead and build it and just see what the build kernel is about, okay? So it copied this link, and I'm going to double check that I set the architecture, and I did, and I'm going to do this build kernel here. So this one is going to take a while, so I'll pause. So here we see that, and we already know this friends over here, right? So we see that the build is done already, and now if I'm going to try and run this run KVM that has a TTY S0 for the console, forget about the debugging. Debugging doesn't is not interesting for us, so you know what? Let's just prove it and just take this param as well as adding enable KVM. So we see that now it works, and we also see that now we have sys, okay? And this is like what I showed like in the beginning, and then like didn't really see. So, and just like a quick reminder, there's nothing like in dev, and I said that the init script would before, I have several versions of it, but like before call mdev -s to automatically populate it, and the way mdev would work would be by going ahead and observing the contents of sysdev, and under block we don't have anything, but under char we have all these nice friends here, right? That when we talk about sysfs, about the unified device driver model, then you will see that there is a logic in it. I talked a very little bit about it, like in the previous video in the meetup. So when I do mdev-s, then automatically /dev exists and so on and so forth, okay? Alright, but I want to see some other things. I want to see what's going on like in the early code, right? Before we saw what was going on in the VGA console. So let's try and run it again. I will stop. I will use VGA ask here, okay? And we'll see these messages, like booting from armies, like from the BIOS of QEMU, and welcome to run demonstration. Boot header says hi, print K, and then this press enter, then we actually see, okay? So this is what I want to see and to look, just to convince you. If I go ahead like to 0, everything will boot just fine here, okay? Same thing. If I go and now do mdev-s, then it will exist. It's the same thing, alright? And I chose VGA mode that has more colors. This is why it's not monochrome like what I showed like in the previous meetup. So I'm now going to get rid of that, and I'm going to say, alright, I want to have this, but to actually see some things on my serial. So I'm going to go and say, alright, console equals TTYS0. Now there is a reason I do it like in steps, okay? But now I'm going to say, for example, serial stdio, okay? And here I don't see anything, okay? And if I continue, I will again not see anything. So look what I did. I rerouted the serial here to be stdio, and I see a lot of things like under the serial, okay? But if I go and look here, I will not see actually anything after the banner. So we have like a separation of these two cells. So that's a progress, okay? So again, like I have this VGA equals ask, and the reason for it is that I see things that I set the console to be TTY as 0. Otherwise, then I will not see anything here. Like let's select the mode, and my console will be here, and I will not see anything like in the serial. So let's go back to this phase, and what I'm going to do now is something a little bit different. The VGA ask, I don't really care about it too much, but let's go ahead, and I'm going to do something called early console. Okay, so do I see anything here? Well, I see what I see. What about here? So what do I need to do in order to actually make the some of like the early prints show in my serial? Okay, this is the question. And to answer this, I actually am going to use the following command lines that both increase the verbosity, okay, and add init-call debug. I can also add the word debug into it, okay, so that's what I'm going to do. So in this particular script I use the no graphic one. Let's still continue with the graphic one, alright, but add these parameters. And we have here early console. Early console is very useful and needed like for ARM as well as like early print K. And I'm going to use like the init call debug argument, and I'm going to increase the log level. I usually, when I plan to talk about it like with the sysfs, I was going to like present it there, but right now like I did not. So what we see here is, again, we don't see too many things in here. Alright, so maybe this early code that is like in header, maybe I cannot use it, like in serial, maybe I cannot see things in its serial. Okay, so let's have a look. Now the truth is, here is that if we look at our configuration, okay, so I'm going to go now to my out directory, okay, and I look at the config. I will see that I have serial early con and early print K, which are needed, okay, but I do not have, for example, the x86 verbose boot up. So let's go ahead and see, maybe this will help me to see more interesting things. So I will let's just have a look like in the menu config. It will be a little bit clearer. It's like under the debugging, and verbose boot up. So this is under kernel hacking, and if I go ahead and look at this guy, then it enables the informational output from the decompression state of the boot. Okay, so perhaps I will not see exactly the things that I was hoping to see, but I will see very interesting things. Now pay attention to this. I have here like things like debug the boot parameters, okay, but this is not so interesting. It just exports some more things via debugfs. It can be useful, and debug low level entry code. So here we have all kind of like sanity checks and things like that that you can actually learn things from as well, okay, but I'm just going to settle for this verbose boot. and I'm going to rebuild the kernel. I'm going to make here. So after we pass that, we can see that after we added this parameter, we can see that if we run like the same thing, again like with a graphical console, then look at the parameters. We have like early console and console TTY as 0, and we still see like the same things, and on the serial we still don't see anything else. Okay. Now there are all kind of parameters that are useful for the sake of actually increasing the log level, so we can go ahead and do that, for example, or like ignoring completely things. So let's give it like another shot here. Okay, so what we're going to do here is essentially we're going to oops so we're essentially going to add more parameters, okay, in order to go and really see like what we want to like choose, for example. So just for the sake of discussion, I'm going to choose here 0, and look what I have. Like I have additional messages that says like, hey, like early console in extract kernel and input data and len and output is where we're going to like jump to. Was it going to be like the address of the kernel once it's like in protected mode and uncompressed, and the compressing Linux parsing elf message. Okay, so I can just get rid of like the VGA ask mode and I will see the exact same thing. So let's do it now. And we see like the same thing, but I will not see it here. We see like calling init call, init call, init call, init calls, because I added an additional parameter here for init call debug. So now I will get rid of it and we will no longer see it. What we did see is because I added debug parameter, we see run init as init process and so on. So if we get rid of that, sorry, I added like debug and ignore log level. So if I get rid of like debug, we still see this because we have this, okay? And the ignore log level is essentially like setting the log level like to 9. So debug can be used for other things. Actually in ARM, when you're going to need to define in some places debug with uppercase in order to enable some early MMU early boot pre-MMU addresses and like expected relocations and stuff like that. And what we do see is like these guys, but pay attention, we will not see them here, okay? So this is like one of the advantages of using like BIOS services, that you have like the UARTs working for you, the early debug code work for you, and in other architectures, if you want to have very low level debug information, you're going to need to make sure that the UART are configured for that. So for example, the bootloader that loads you can take care of that for you. If you see messages from uboot, then from uboot, then it already exists for you. So you can take this into consideration and use in very early phases, like in the boot sequence, the ability like to send it to serial. Okay, so these kind of things are possible. If you want to do it like on x86, you need to make sure that you are able to output to the serial early enough. There is no need for that for the very early boot code, because it will say, hey, I'm using BIOS services and I'm going to send something just like to the screen, to the display functionalities of the BIOS, and that's it. Okay, so this is like the thing that I wanted like to add. And if you followed and it was new for you, then you learned a bit more about some other kernel parameters. which you can find the documentation for example, under the kernel tree, documentation, and then there is going to be like all kind of RST documents, and you can generate the documentation, and basically under admin guide you're going to have this. In older kernel versions than 4.8 or 4.9 you're going to have a lot of textual files and other templates, but here like everything is like nicely here, most of it. When you see text, it means that it has not necessarily been converted like to the restructured text. So if I want to see like where are some kernel parameter descriptions, then I can go either like to the text one, and then let's see, debug. This is for CPI, ACPI. I don't really care about it. And you can see that we have like enable kernel debugging, events log level, and we can see that there might be like init call debug, okay, that like trains all these kind of things like that, and so on and so forth, okay. Perhaps there is a redundancy, and we also see it in RST. Let's see. Not exactly. It looks like a different format with to-dos, and here we actually include the text file, so it will be included here. So that's how it is, and perhaps I can talk about this like in another time. So I just want to make this one short to show what I complemented in this particular to show what I want to add to the meetup in the things that like were not like 100% like working because of the configuration that I dropped. So here I proved that, I showed that, and we can now proceed to the ARM one.